Ali, I want to take you back maybe 6 to 8 weeks. And on ESPN FC, you and the gang were talking about the English title race. And Chelsea were certainly mentioned as one of the contenders. But since then, things seem to have gone wrong. But what has gone wrong and why under Thomas Tuchel, do you think?
The fact that we mentioned them as title contenders, usually that's a kiss of death. That doesn't help. Look, it is very clear to see that whatever made Chelsea successful in their Champions League run, that ability to defend as a group and absorb pressure and then go out in transition and be able to find those spaces in transition and score key goals in key moments. All those things have disappeared. But most of all, what has disappeared in terms of the identity of the group is that the defending that we're used to with Chelsea and Thomas Tuchel is not happening. It's too many mistakes coming from many different areas on the field. And it's not just the back line, it's also the midfield line. And you have goalkeeping mistakes as well. And then you have the limitations in terms of goal scoring that you thought you had resolved with Romelu Lukaku, and that hasn't quite worked out the way you would have wanted. And so you are back to depending on Timo Werner and Kai Havertz to score a goal for you, or somebody, maybe Pulisic, shows up and scores a goal here and there. But there isn't a consistent thread to score goals game in and game out. So you put all of those things together, and that's bad enough. But what I think is worse is that now you're starting to hear, alongside the poor results or poor run of form, you're starting to hear rumblings within Chelsea. And Lukaku flirting with other clubs and other players not quite happy with their role. All the things that do not come out when you're winning, but tend to come out when you're not doing as well as you were expected. When those things start gathering momentum, that's when a manager is in trouble.
Are they just 2 or 3 decent results away from being back to where they were and all the issues gone? Or does it go a little bit deeper than that? Because they've really struggled in the league to keep clean sheets since Ben Chilwell got hurt. Reece James, that's 2 of their best players in attacking wide areas. Him out for a fair chunk of the season doesn't help as well. What does it tell us overall about the strength and depth that they have? And is it in certain areas that they have strength and depth and they're not strong enough in other areas, like the wing-back position?
I can tell you that in terms of the initial part of your question and talking about getting a couple of results and getting back to whatever their expectations were, if those expectations were to contend for a league title, that's not happening. They are not winning the league. They are not going to get close to Manchester City, and Liverpool would be the only one that would contend for a title here. Chelsea had their opportunities and had their chances to close that gap, to make a statement against Manchester City this past weekend. That didn't happen. They lost the game, and I think that's it. That's a final blow. See you later. Take care. We'll see you next year. In terms of what happens from here on out, that's the really tricky part. You just mentioned some of the injuries. You just mentioned some of the challenges. But is it a team now that once they realize the objective, the goal that we had in mind is no longer realistic? So what is their reaction? If you see a team that generates some momentum towards the end of the season and plays a part in Europe and actually makes a run, then you say, hey, okay, all right. You know what? We didn't achieve what we wanted to domestically, but we're still a solid core group of players, and we're still just 1 or 2 players away from truly challenging at the very top of our league. If you don't see that, if instead what you see is a slide, if you see a team that sometimes may show up and perhaps look a little disinterested, that's when you have to start asking serious questions about Thomas Tuchel. And that's a couple of directions that this team can take. They can either say, you know what, we're not winning the title, but there are other things that we can compete for. Or the other option is, sadly, the slide down continues. The momentum goes in a negative direction. And once it goes in a negative direction, it's very difficult to stop.
Yeah, I mean, they've shown they can win the Champions League without winning their own domestic title. I just wonder how much overall a certain interview that Lukaku gave to Sky Italia has been a part of this kind of melee and this mess. Or is it something that's just another hurdle for Thomas Tuchel to to try and deal with and climb over and get to the better part of the season?
So if Chelsea was struggling to get results, and that was the only problem that Thomas Tuchel had, you deal with it as a manager. But when you have on this side, you're struggling to get results consistently, and then on this side, you have your super duper goal scoring threat, Romelu Lukaku, that hasn't quite been what you wanted him to be, flirting openly with Inter and saying, hey, I would love to play with you guys. You guys are the best. You guys are awesome. You're my number one choice. I love you so much. You're thinking to yourself, this is the last thing I need. I don't need this in my life. You're Thomas Tuchel. You're trying to figure out, how do we generate momentum? How do we take a step forward? You don't need the superstar to be running his mouth. That doesn't help anybody. It doesn't help Chelsea, doesn't help Thomas Tuchel, and it certainly doesn't help the perception of Romelu Lukaku either.
You think Chelsea looked tired against Brighton? It's been spoken about by a couple of people, including Thomas Tuchel afterwards.
I don't know that they look physically tired. I think they just look worn out mentally. It's a team that is showing up to games with a mentality that perhaps things are going to go wrong. And when they go wrong, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's like, well, see, we knew it was going to go wrong at some point, and here we are. We lost a couple more points. See you guys later.
Problem that they have now is still games on the horizon. However, they will have a break after the Spurs and the Plymouth game. Final question regarding Chelsea here. What has previous events taught you about the patience of Abramovich as an owner when managers don't quite get the results that the owner is hoping for?
Well, I don't think, if you're referring to perhaps Frank Lampard, I think this is apples and oranges, because you're talking about a history of success with Thomas Tuchel that is far superior than that of Frank Lampard. And so I think his leash is going to be much longer. I think he has built enough equity within Chelsea to where, at the very least, you can have an open conversation between Abramovich and Thomas Tuchel and say, look, this is what went wrong. This is how we think we can get it right. And this is what's necessary for next season. That conversation can, at the very least, take place, because I think Thomas Tuchel has earned that right if he wants it. And once you have that conversation, if you're convinced that this is the guy for the future, you move with him if you're Abramovich. But if you see that slide that I was talking about early on, then this is the part in which perhaps you don't even have that final conversation and say, nah, this is not trending in the right direction.
Look, even the best teams go through struggles. It's how they bounce back from that. And with only one Premier League game and several cup ties to come for Chelsea over the next few weeks, they may get that chance to rotate. And who knows, they could quite easily be back to winning ways pretty soon.
Thanks so much for watching ESPN on YouTube. And for more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for premium content and live streaming, subscribe to ESPN Plus.